till this morning on ITV. And joining me, like I said earlier on this guest, we are talking about the ECOWAS as implication of reopening of the border by federal government right there. And joining me this morning is a public affairs analyst, Godwin Peter, to take a look at that. And also Ilyasu Dadu will also be joining me via phone as we take a look at this issue and also the implication of this for the Nigerian economy and also bilateral relationship between both countries. It's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Same here, my brother.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
For quite some time. We know what happened late last year when the junta decided to take over government in Niger Republic. A whole lot of value over it. A lot of people in the ECOWAS countries in the ECOWAS region were not really happy with that decision, and that led to sanction. But the government remained adamant; they are not letting go. But right now, few months down the line, the federal government decided to lift that sanction. What do you make of this?
Well, in as much as Nigeria and other ECOWAS countries believe in democratic elected president, so we didn't expect to have kudos from those countries clapping for the military junta who decided to take over power. So the decision of the ECOWAS to frown about the decision of the military who took over the power was quite right. But I also think that ECOWAS also was so hasty in placing the sanction because the ECOWAS have its own sole goal, and the goal of ECOWAS is not to interfere in internal politics of member states. It's only to contribute to economic development and raising the life and the standard of the member state. So now, in a situation where in a means of trying to make the military to probably leave seat back to the democratically elected president, and they decided to give this sanction. To me, in my own point of view, the sanction was not actually going to the military junta. It was actually, the effect was going to the people. All right. For example, the people that are on seat, you are banning them from NEPA light. They could have their means of still having energy. Okay. Now you are blocking the borders for domestic goods, not to penetrate from both countries. So it is a lose-lose situation to both the Nigerians and Nigerians because it was supposed to be a bilateral stuff. Okay, let me just pause your thought right there. Also joining us via phone is Ilyasu Dadu, a public affairs analyst, also a foreign diplomat who has also served in Germany and some other parts of Europe. A wonderful morning to you, Mr. Ilyasu.
Good morning, how are you?
Okay, let's get to the nitty-gritty of this discourse. I have Godwin Peter with me in the studio right here, and also you linking up with us. What do you make of the decision of federal government to reopen borders with Niger? For somebody who has served in the foreign ministry, what do you make of this?
Well, it's a welcome development, and it will afford us the opportunity of, pulling from the brink of the actions that we had intended to take in trying to restore democracy. It's a desirable thing to have thought about, trying to see how we can restore democracy. But the efforts that we wanted to expend in doing that is something that is quite questionable, because at the end of the day, it exposed our limitations in terms of resources to be able to carry out this very important task, because we had done, what we went with it was the first step in trying to get the action done, which is, applying sanctions on Niger and closing the border and all that. And then we're also talking about trying to intervene militarily, that's to use military force to pull and to push the current military government in power and restore the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum.
Yeah.
But then, do we have the resources to do that? Do we have the capability? That was the question. And of course, an undertaking like this will be messy, very, very messy, and there was no strategy really to be able to carry it out. And at the same time, again, we also saw that there was a blowback in terms of the actions we undertook, because it hurt us as much as it hurt the Niger. We have about seven states that border on Niger, and along this line, there have been cultural links. For for a long time, for centuries. Some of the people in Niger along those borders are very much related in terms of, marital, connections, cultural connections, historical connections, trade connections, commercial connections. And in doing that, it was like more or less like cutting our face to spite, cutting our nose to spite our face, even though it wasn't intended. But then again, now that we have, gone back to look at the whole thing altogether, look at our limitations, it's now time to come back from the brink so that we can recalibrate our engagements in Niger in a more structured and focused manner to bring about the desirable results.
But the major thing is, it does not undermine Nigeria's influence in the ECOWAS region, considering the fact that Nigeria used to be a major force when it comes to issues of this nature, where we've seen Nigeria restore a government back into power in some other countries across the West African region. We had some issues in Liberia, when Nigeria used the ECOWAS force to work with other West African countries to ensure we bring peace. But in Niger, a country beside us, I want to use the word ordinary Niger, will find it difficult to be able to restore normalcy. Is it that Nigeria seems to be losing its influence in the West African region?
No, you don't go into these things with emotions in mind. You really have to look at things in a very cold, calculated manner. Do you have the resources to go into Niger with military force? That's the question. And do you even have the staging post? And don't forget, involvement in Liberia is different from involvement in Niger, because Liberia is quite a distance from us, and we could say, okay, well, we could keep whatever problems it's going to have or whatever blowback it's going to have, our involvement is going to have there at that place, and if it comes to the wars, we could move out. And you could see that it was really, really something that really stretched Nigeria's resources in Liberia. It was the first time we were undertaking that. There were a lot of mistakes made, but we made a lot of progress. But at the end of the day, bigger powers had to come in, because we had limitations in terms of our resources to expend there. Billions and billions were being wasted, were being spent in Liberia, and also young boys and our officers were being wasted there. But now, in the case of Nigeria, it would have been a far worse situation if we had tried to go in militarily, because then it will be our border very close to us, and then the border we have with Nigeria is so wide, so large, that where are we going to stay? What kind of operation are we going to take? Is it going to be an airborne assault to get into airborne assault to remove those the military in Niger in their strategic places, or is it going to be ground? We're going to put boots on the ground. Now all these things have limitations, because do we have the resources? Do we have the resources to be able to carry out an airborne assault? And don't forget, Niger had closed its own borders, so if an airspace, so if any attempt to move in air by air, we just be sitting guns for those guys. Even if it's a one man with a dead gun, we're going to have a lot of problems. And secondly, if we're going to put boots on ground, the terrain there will be seen from afar off. If you've been to those areas, you will see that it's a very flat terrain. And once you try to move in, every tree, even if it's a tree, it's going to be your enemy, because you don't know where these guys will be hiding. And they know the terrain much more than our people, because we're moving into a target or into an area in which we'll be seen far off, 100 miles ahead, and that would be very difficult for our people to make any success. So, and then again, for this kind of operation, we need to be able to cover the entire border, because as we're attacking in one area, they could also attack launch attacks and encourage insurgents in attacking also. How in that situation, it's not going to be a war again to remove the military government. It's going to be a war between Niger and Nigeria. And that kind of war is going to be asymmetrical in different forms. And at the same time, so the initial project of trying to remove the government would not be trying to fight. The Nigerian people would see that as an assault on their country, and they respond accordingly.
Okay, let me hold your thought there and hold the line. Quickly, let me ask our Governor Peter, who is also with me right here in the studio. We talked about the repercussions of those things, the shots taken right there. But another major worry is the issue of insurgency. He mentioned something that could happen. We are battling with our own internal issues right there. A lot of people have also been, some of the insurgency that we've had in the past, they're also coming in through the border. Yeah. Closing the border with to some extent may also have reduced the insurgency. Reopening the border, does that not mean we are opening ourselves to allow insurgency to come in once again?
It's very unfortunate that sometimes like this, where action has been taken, we don't really sit down to look at the repercussion before taking it. Just like our senior comrade have told us of the resources that would have been considered if we had to go to launch attack there. Yeah. Okay, the question should be, if Nigeria if let's say ECOWAS have thought that Nigeria might not have the capacity to launch this attack successfully, why the hastiness of the sanction that was led? Fine. The area of the insurgency, which is one of the reasons why this government was even taken over, because the Nigerian were unable to tackle issues of insurgency, which to some point they infiltrated into Nigerian borders. But I'm believing that opening the border, the military angle of Nigeria should be able to make sure that they pull the defense that will stop the infiltration of unwanted miscreant into our borders, because the major reason why the borders is open is for economic flow and the bilateral relations that have existed for centuries between Nigeria and Niger to continue. So in terms of security of our own nation, it is our onus to do that.
Okay, Mr. Elisu, how do you react to that? The worries about insurgency using that avenue of reopening the border to come in again. How do you react to that?
Well, it's a catch-22 situation, because on one hand, yes, the closure of the border seems to have, lessened a bit the incidence of insurgency in Nigeria. And there is the possibility that if we open the border, there'll be a lot of insurgency will surge.
Yeah.
But then, that is neither here nor there, because at the same time we need to be able to let our armed forces realize that, look, if they need to get their acts together, they need, now that we cannot not have relationship with Niger, because it's very critical. That's an area where so much goods is transported. We have a lot of economic relations with them, cultural and all that. We need to have that border open with Niger. That's the bottom line. As for the insurgency, this also provides an opportunity for us, that's Nigerian armed forces and Nigerian armed forces, to work together, to calibrate their actions together, so that they can now tackle the insurgency. Because it's not just against us, but it's also against the Niger. Because along that Sahel belt, that area is infiltrated with so many insurgent groups that are quite effective. So we could work together on that. That's why I said it's a new opportunity to recalibrate our engagement with Niger. Because now we have a less friendly Niger government. We can talk with them, not minding the fact that they're already there entrenched. You can't stop them. But we need to work on common grounds. Common grounds in this case mean to try to stop the insurgency from spreading. Secondly, to also continue with economic activities, so that at least goods will flow into the country and goods will flow out of the country, and people will make money. People would provide. There will be a lot of economic activities going on, and then we can sit down with them and tackle the insurgency. It's an opportunity for us to do that, which has been provided by this action of Nigeria. They will have electricity, they will have food coming in, medicines and all that. So it's an opportunity to say, look, hey, they said, we're giving you the olive branch. Let's sit down and look at our common issues and discuss. Maybe that way we can tackle the issues together. But closing the border and not talking, not dialogue, not diplomatic effort, that itself is a dangerous thing. So one thing leads to the other in this particular case. So we must be able to look at it. There will always be problems, but you don't solve problems by closing the door, against each other. Especially since you have had this relationship for centuries. even before the coming of colonialists in this area. So we need to sit down and say, look, hey, both of us have a lot of issues we need to discuss frankly, constructively, and engage in a way that we can find solutions, not to be able to create problems more for us
okay.
than we already have.
Okay, but Russia is being mentioned in the scheme of things. In the light of what transpired, Niger decided to cut off relationship with some West African, with some European countries and some top African countries across the world, and extend try to build a relationship with Russia. And some people are saying recently we have our foreign ministry holding a dialogue with the Russian government. That few days later, we are having this issue about reopening of the border. What do you think Russia's role might have been in the whole scheme of things?
Well, the danger has always been that with the development in Niger, we would not want a situation whereby this area will become another theater of war or another theater of strategic issues.
Yeah.
Now that the Niger government has kicked the French, there's always a vacuum, a strategic vacuum. Of course, the Americans are still there. They still have their drone base there. They are also a factor to be considered. Then the Russians, the Nigerian government went across to get the Russians in because they don't want to get a vacuum, a strategic vacuum. If the French are leaving and they believe that they will be under threat, or especially with the ECOWAS action looming, they needed to have somebody, a strategic partner, that could supply them with weapons, supply them with intelligence, supply them with all kinds of assistance to be able to ward off this looming threat from ECOWAS. So Russia, of course, Russia is not only in Niger, it's also in across the Sahara, the Sahel belt. It's in Burkina Faso, it's in Mali, and I think also in Guinea.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like, opening a vacuum, which the Russians, of course, will end it because they have the things to make that will attract, this government, military government, and they have jumped into the matter because this is an area. Don't forget, they're also in Central African Republic, so it's an opportunity for them. But for us, Nigeria being a very important factor in this area, we must look at the things very, very clearly and very, very strategically, not emotionally, and look at how we can dissuade these countries from engaging with the power whose intentions we do not know, and who at the end of the day will be more interested in securing their strategic interests, not the interests of the countries that they are in there. So these are things we have to really sit down and look at. And I believe our country should sit down again and look at our engagement. Look, if we want to influence things happening in Niger, we have so many ways we can do it without even causing any problem. For instance, we have a Voice of Nigeria.
Yeah.
The Voice of Nigeria can increase, French broadcasts into Niger, Hausa broadcasts into Niger, Arabic broadcasts into Niger, telling these countries of the dangers of engaging foreign powers that are not much different from France that they are giving anyway. Because so we must be able to go in there in the ways that we think we can influence the opinion of people there, rather than just trying to sit down or even try to engage the military. It will create danger signs. If we say, look, we have big Voice of Nigeria, because that's what was done during the Cold War. Americans had Radio Free Liberty. They have Radio Free Liberty, yes. That's on Radio Free Europe and Liberty Radio. Those were making engaging broadcasts in Russian, in Czech, in German, in all kinds of languages that are being used in the Eastern Bloc. So they were talking to people who freedom fighters, human rights groups, who would now create attention and awareness of the dangers of the communism from the capitalist perspective. We could do the same thing. There are people, Nigerian people speak Hausa, but 3/4 of Nigerian people speak Hausa. Go to them and increase the Voice of Nigeria broadcasts into the areas and other broadcasts. I said, look, you guys are having a very, very dangerous situation there. And the military regime, of course, is there, but then let us look at the dangers that the situation is for you guys. Try as much as possible to get your government to be able to be more democratic, to be able to restore democracy. Now, if you continue this broadcast into those countries, then you have a body of opinion, a critical body of opinion in those countries Burkina Faso, Niger, and
Mali.
Mali. And did you create a critical mass of people who begin to talk about, look, open up the space, let us discuss, so that the governments of those countries will realize that democracy is coming and democracy must be restored in those countries. Otherwise, if you just sit down and don't do this and say, okay, this, at the end of the day, nothing is solved. From our own perspective, our own interest is not resolved. The interests of people in those areas are not resolved. And then we have foreign powers coming in with guns and all that. Because I remember those countries themselves said they have formed an association of Sahel states and that they could get weapons easily from Russia, from China, and from Iran. Now, these are danger signals.
Exactly.
We have to be able to look at and be able to take stock of.
Okay, I really appreciate that incisive analysis you gave. Still hold the line for us right there. Godwin, you listen to what Mr. Eliasu Agadu said about some of these implications and the waning influence of Nigeria. What lessons you think Nigeria must have learned from the way they handle the issue about these countries? Not only Nigeria, some other countries that the junta decided to take over.
Like I said from the beginning of the show, that it wasn't a good thing that the military could push out a government that was democratically elected, but that the decision of ECOWAS from the president of Nigeria was a bit hasty. You know, when you are taking decision before you announce it out, look at the effect. And I think that is one of the problems we are having even in our internal politics. Now, ECOWAS probably have considered that the threat they were trying to throw to Niger, thinking that from there they will back out of their operation. The threat is now summing up courage. And now, in a way to defend themselves, Niger have even go externally to bring other stronger force that Nigeria cannot contend with, in the like of Russia and other countries that they are trying to beef up in case of any aggression from Nigerian point and or angle. You know, so I think the lesson here should be when internal issues or external issues is happening among any member state of any international organization, they should sit down and look at the effect before taking action. And if you are going to mediate on an internal issue of a sovereign nation that have their own rules and constitution and sovereignty, you should go on mediation, not in giving them a coercive decision that if you don't do this, because all these things shouldn't have gone this far if Nigeria didn't threaten to bring military operation to remove the, stuff like that. So you don't use military to pull out military in the way of trying to install democratic elected president. There should have been a way of mediating, just like our senior colleague have said, to make sure that this dialogue and a peaceful approach was used. So I think it's better for us to approach.
Mr. Eliasu, do you think government was a little bit hasty in the sense that we saw a wave of overthrow in some countries in the West African region? Probably must have been the reason why the ECOWAS region were hasty in taking sanctions against Niger, because of the wave of probably this might also get to happen in Nigeria. Do you think that could have been the reason?
No, I think that's why you have diplomacy, because you see, let me give you an analogy. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, I mean, some of the people in America, the strategists in America said, look, let's move in there and remove these guys. But then, you realize at that point, America was not in a position, even though it had the strength, but it would have done more damage if America had intervened immediately. Iraqis had moved there, because the Iraqis would have been waiting for the Americans to come, and that would have been a serious bloodbath. But then they waited until they did all kinds of, knowing that they had the strength to be able to move the Iraqis, they waited until they expended all the diplomatic efforts while planning, and because they had the resources. In the case of Niger, that is what we should have done. We should have said, hey, we condemn this vehemently, and we want you to restore democracy in that country. Release President Bazoum, bring him back to power, and then we can begin to talk about how to do that. Then while you are doing that, you are also taking up, measures that will put pressure on these guys. But when we didn't do that, we decided, I think under pressure from possibly France, And then don't forget that what is happening in those French countries are a result of some of the contradictions within France, with French control of those countries. Because, you know, in a situation whereby Niger was the fourth largest, or is still the fourth largest uranium exporter in the whole world. Part of that, the mineral, that's the uranium, was being used and was being used to power, you know, electricity or energy in France, to the detriment of the Nigerian people. I mean, they were being paid peanuts for this very, very rare, expensive mineral, while the French were just enjoying it to the best of their ability. And look at even the way the economic partnership or economic relationship between France and some of these countries. I'm not justifying what happened, but these are the realities on ground in these countries. They see their mineral, things that should make them happy, should make them live a reasonably good life, going to France at the price that does not even consider the people. These countries are some of the poorest countries in the world, but they also have some of the highest number of minerals. So you can see the contradictions. So it got to a point where these guys said, look, we want to change the situation. Of course, the method of changing the situation was not good, but at the same time, again, you have to make sure, you have to also look at that area. And then Nigeria, the issues in the French-speaking countries is different from how we, from the English-speaking countries, perceive it. We look at it as, yes, democracy has been truncated, we want to restore democracy. But in those same countries, right across West Africa and Africa, in general, there are decades of economic, unequal economic partnership. And this has come to the fore. And these guys are moving to say, okay, they may have done that opportunistically, but at the same time, you cannot deny the fact that France has been oppressing them economically. So if Nigeria, as leader of ECOWAS, was to take this situation, it should have sat down and said, look, take our military chiefs, take our diplomatic experts, take our intellectuals and say, look, hey, we have this problem on our hand. On the one hand, there's the ECOWAS issue. On the other hand, there's Nigeria's intrinsic interest, because we have to be able to put them together and see which we can look at. Because at the end of the day, the staging post to attack or to intervene in Niger, the military staging point will be Nigeria. Will be from Nigeria. It will not be from, because all the countries bordering on Niger are not, the Burkina Faso, the Malis, are against the ECOWAS. So the country that has the power and the resources, at least relatively, at the proximity to Nigeria, would have been Nigeria. And that would have been very, very serious for us, because it's going to affect us and affect our relationship with Nigeria. And even within Nigeria, there will be repercussions, very serious repercussions within Nigeria. So that was not the best thing to have done if we had wanted to go in military. So these are some of the things that we need to sit down and look. It's not something, even if you have the power, you have to sit down and look at all the variables and look at which one will be best available for you to be used in certain circumstances. We didn't do that. We were so, so buoyed up. We want to go into Niger, we want to restore
we want to flex our muscle.
Exactly. And what is our muscle big enough to be flexed there? Because the Niger will sit down and wait for us to come in, and they take us like sitting ducks. It's not going to be the military. They're going to mobilize their people. Any person you see, any child you see in Niger will fight in Nigeria in one way or other. So at the end of the day, when we meet some of these challenges, we should be able to sit down rather than go in immediately and make pronouncements, policy pronouncements, diplomatic policy pronouncements, which is sit down, look at all the variables, look at the diplomatic variables, look at the military variables, look at the strategic variables, and all that, and look at which one can we take relative to our strength and resources, rather than just making statements and making pronouncements that we at the end of the day will not be able to carry out.
Really interesting right there, talking about what is happening and the way our manner government handle the issues. And now, going forward, how do we cement our relationship with these countries on our border posts? Because the issue about Niger seems like it has burnt our fingers. But how do you return a relationship back? Not only with Niger Republic, but other countries across the West African region that have been taken over by some junta, especially with some harsh measures being taken against them. How do you ensure that we return this relationship to where it used to be?
That is why I said at the beginning of this conversation that it's a good development, a welcome development. We can sit down and talk without pressure on both sides.
Okay.
We without pressure on our side to intervene, and they without pressure of the looming threat of military. We sit down and talk constructively, engage, and try to make peace moves, because that is very critical. The military, these are military men. They are trained to fight and to fight and die. You cannot reason with them because they know, for instance, strategically, they are already entrenched, they are already on ground. And if you want to go in and fight them militarily, you will lose the case. Even if the cause you are trying to fight is reasonable, it's good, but you have to use enough, diplomatic reasoning to do that. And then secondly, at the head of it's actually a breather for these countries. Because at the end of the day, the threat is now removed, at least of military. And also, the sanctions are also removed. The action that those sanctions are brought to them is removed. So they can breathe a little easier. Then our own goal should be, look, we want you guys to restore democracy. Let us talk about how you can restore democracy in your countries. Let us see how, in the case of Niger, how you can restore Bazoum. Let's see a transition period and all that. The same thing in Burkina Faso, in Mali, so that we can begin to, talk about restoring democracy in those countries and returning the countries to normal, and then also returning them back to ECOWAS, because these are the issues we have to take it on board. And we also want to be able to, like in the case of Niger, to be able to do some kind of, peace building, because a lot of things have broken. They will not like the fact that the electricity they get from Moscow need very seriously cut them off for some time. It has really affected them, hospitals and all that. So we need to be able to some fence building mechanism, all kinds of relationship has to be reviewed on the atmosphere of peace and this, and then we begin to convince the military in those countries, because they themselves are not having it easy. A military regime is one of the most insecure military regimes. So at the end of the day, it will be a breathing space for those guys, and then also to try to see how going forward there will be concessions, give and take on both sides. Okay, that's what we did with Jammeh in Gambia. We gave him a breathing space. Okay, you have done your worst, and we think, okay, let's give you a chance. You can, go find a neutral country to go and stay there, but give the chance for the civilians to come. We could bring up those things. These are things that we could talk, and then bring up a transition program and all that, and talk. And the situation why you're not talking and you are talking about guns and all that, it will not solve any problems, especially when you don't even have the resources to carry out this.
That's the part I don't like to listen to. The part that we don't have the resources to go into that fight. Africa not having the resources to tackle the
You have to be realistic.
That's the reality.
Except of course you want
Sorry, brother.
in body parts. Your economy with procurement, because you have to spend money that you ordinarily would have spent on building, things that would matter to the people. You have to deploy it to the war front, and then you also have to be at the mercy of international arms merchants. It's an opportunity for them to sell their arms, and then and then it creates a never-ending cycle of violence, economic. Our economy, even without a war, is already down. If you go into a war with Niger, you are going to have more and more problems. So you have to be realistic. Forget about the fact that flexible models. You flex models, at the end of the day, your models are just
deflated.
So at the end of the day, it's realism that should guide you on this. Not brinkmanship, because brinkmanship would lead to a lot of things that you may not, may not be palatable to your country and to the person you are trying to resist. Even America going into Iran was not something they had to do alone. It had to get the support of many countries around the world with its resources. It needed resources from Kuwait, from Saudi Arabia, from all kinds of countries. Militarily, money, you know, and all kinds of things. So this is what you have to do. You have to be very careful in handling these situations. Going forward next time, we had good intentions in Liberia, yes, but at the end of the day, we couldn't carry it through resource-wise because it was draining us.
Yeah.
Draining us. Other powers had to step in and take it off, even though we did the heavy eating in Liberia, and we would have done the heavy eating and heavy lifting, in Niger.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's going to cause a lot of problems. And don't forget, those border states will even raise more insurgents as you are fighting.
Yeah.
So this I think it was something that really got us from getting into that Niger debacle. Otherwise, we would now be. Even Abuja would not even be safe. I'm sorry to say that, but when you get into a war, anything can happen.
Anything can happen. I must say a big thank you to you, Mr. Elias Ugadu, for joining us right here and also giving us further insight to the decision taken by federal government and the decision to reopen the border. Thank you so much for linking up with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I see how we bring Godwin Peter in the studio right here. I'm still talking about the reopening of the border and the implication for the economy right now. And now we know we are battling with so many issues.
Yeah.
Food scarcity is one of the major problems. With the of that border, will it also allow free flow of food between both countries? Probably reduce the scarcity we are experiencing right now in the country.
Absolutely, it's going to do a whole lot in terms of the free flow of food, but it's actually going to be based on the products that we are getting from them. All right, I go through the news and I discovered that some of the journalists have been in different border states and have actually seen the compliance in terms of borders reopening, and trucks of food like beans and the rest have started flowing. So I believe that the food crisis that we are facing in Nigeria, especially those that we are getting from the Nigerians, we are going to have a relieving hand from henceforth.
Okay, so much will happen right here. Let's quickly take this quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back still this morning on ITV, and I'm still your host Olulokwe Ogutime, and also still with me in the studio is Godwin Peter as we take a look at the decision of the federal government to reopen the border, and not only that of the ECOWAS region. We also talked about some of the positives that will definitely be coming from that. The states across the borderline have been complaining. So Borno and so many other states have been complaining about the implication of shutting of border by federal government, and it has also led to food scarcity, deprivation, and so many other things right here, because it has also affected their relationship with them. Not forgetting Nigeria also have a good relationship. Even have a bridge that is being constructed straight from Nigeria to Niger Republic. It also shows the level of relationship between both countries right now. But with the shutting of the border, that puts an end to all those things right now. And what do you think might be the feeling of those states that share borders with Niger at this point in time, following the decision by the federal government?
It's a welcome development, so the feeling is going to be a feeling of relief, because it is those of them that are very close that will tell you the reality of what they are passing through. Like I said, it was a lose-lose situation for both Nigeria and Nigeria, especially the local communities who are very interwoven, both in marriage, culturally, religious, and otherwise. So it's a welcome development, and there's going to be a whole lot of relief, both economically, politically, socially, to both the Nigerians and the Nigerians.
Okay, so much right there. I've been talking with Godwin Peter. I must say big thank you to you, Godwin Peter, for linking up with us this morning, and also for Mr. Elias Ugadu, who also joined us via phone to be part of the discourse and explain the implication of the decision taken by ECOWAS government on the reopening of border with Niger Republic.